Your FastMCP server needs WorkOS authentication, but you don't want to hardcode credentials or sacrifice security for simplicity. We'll show how 2 lines of code can fully configure WorkOS OAuth, using required environment variables for credentials, scopes, and server URLs, while handling automatic token validation, user redirection, and even production-ready HTTPS enforcement. The pattern supports both explicit provider setup and automatic provisioning when FastMCP server auth is defined, with clear error messages for any missing required parameters like cliented, client secret, or authkit domain. From FastMCP, import FastMCP. From FastMCP, server, auth, providers, WorkOS import WorkOSProvider. Hash and vars provide default values for WorkOSProvider. Auth equals WorkOSProvider. Hash uses nvar defaults. MCP equals FastMCP name WorkOS protected server. Auth equals auth. This demonstrates the OAuth proxy pattern with required configuration validation, where WorkOS handles authentication as transparent middleware while your application remains auth agnostic. The pattern enforces explicit requirements: client credentials, domain configuration, and base URL through either constructor arguments or environment variables, failing fast with clear errors if any required parameter is missing. Unlike silent failure systems, this implementation validates all prerequisites up front during server initialization. The flow begins with mandatory setup where you must specify WorkOS credentials, your server's public URL, and required OAuth scopes like OpenID, profile, and email. When a client connects, the proxy either validates an existing token or redirects to WorkOS for authentication, using a configurable callback path, defaulting to auth callback. Tokens are automatically cached client-side for subsequent requests, while the server enforces timeouts on WorkOS API calls to prevent hangs. For production, the pattern mandates HTTPS and proper domain configuration to ensure secure OAuth callbacks. This approach eliminates custom auth boilerplate while maintaining security through strict validation and WorkOS's managed infrastructure. You gain single sign-on, token management, and scope enforcement without writing auth logic, trading minimal configuration complexity for robust, standards-compliant security. The automatic provisioning option further simplifies deployment, omitting the auth parameter entirely if FastMCP server auth is set, while still enforcing all required parameters through environment variables. Let's break it down line by line. From FastMCP, import FastMCP. This imports FastMCP, the core class for building AI-callable tool servers. It handles tool registration, request routing, and integrates with auth providers like WorkOS. Required parameters must be configured either via environment variables or constructor arguments. Missing values trigger explicit errors, not silent failures. From FastMCP, server, auth, providers, WorkOS import WorkOSProvider. Imports WorkOSProvider for OAuth authentication, requiring either environment variables or explicit parameters for cliented, client secret, authkit domain, and base URL. The base URL must be publicly accessible for OAuth callbacks, with required scopes defaulting to OpenID, profile, and email for standard identity verification. Missing required parameters fail explicitly during initialization, not silently, while optional settings like redirect path and timeout seconds allow customization of the OAuth flow. Hash and vars provide default values for WorkOSProvider. Auth equals WorkOSProvider. Hash uses nvar defaults. This instantiates WorkOSProvider using environment variables for OAuth configuration, with required parameters including cliented, client secret, authkit domain, and base URL. Missing any required parameter raises explicit errors during initialization, not silent failures, while optional parameters like redirect path and timeout seconds use sensible defaults. The provider handles the full OAuth flow, token validation, user redirection, and automatic client-side caching, while enforcing standard scopes, open-eyed, profile, email. For production, ensure HTTPS and proper domain configuration, as the base URL must be publicly accessible for OAuth callbacks. MCP equals FastMCP name WorkOS protected server. Auth equals auth. This instantiates a production-ready, FastMCP server with WorkOS authentication enforced. Required parameters like cliented, client secret, authkit domain, and base URL must be configured via environment variables or constructor arguments. Missing values trigger explicit errors, not silent failures. The auth provider automatically handles OAuth flows with default scopes, open-eyed, profile, email, token validation, and secure redirects to auth callback, while the name parameter identifies this instance in logs and monitoring. WorkOS authentication pattern. The WorkOSProvider implements OAuth proxy authentication for FastMCP, requiring explicit configuration of client credentials, domain, and server URL, while handling token validation through WorkOS AuthKit's userinfo endpoint. Required parameters: cliented, client secret, authkit domain, and base URL must be provided either through environment variables or constructor arguments, with missing values causing explicit validation errors rather than silent failures. The two-line setup enables automatic provisioning when FastMCP server auth is configured, completely omitting the auth parameter while maintaining full OAuth capabilities with standard scopes, open-eyed, profile, email, and configurable redirect paths.
The authentication that demands everything protects everything by demanding nothing.